Between 2003 and 2008, you deployed to Iraq 4 times.
Correct.
The fourth time, you were inactive reserve.
Right.
You got called back, you know, to active duty and shipped back to Iraq. 4 tours in Iraq, in a 5-year period. I wonder if, if I just sort of list off each tour, if you could summarize basically what each tour was about, right? So what's the quick summary of each tour? So the first tour, January through June 2003.
That would just be the invasion phase for Iraq, the shock and awe period of essentially getting to Baghdad, taking control of Baghdad, and then establishing a foothold there, and then taking out Saddam's regime to where the army would then take over peacetime operations.
And if I remember right, your thought at the end of this first tour was that the war was basically done,
Well, I
mission.
thought I was done. I was like, thank God, I lived through this. I'm done with it. I don't have to come back to Iraq. That was the feeling.
So we'll return and talk about that. Second tour, January through July 2004.
That can be summarized as basically the start of the insurgency. I think where the traditional conventional army kind of melted away, kind of turned to hit and run tactics, kind of like similar to, I guess, what the Viet Cong did in Vietnam. A lot of ambushes, a lot of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, just the start of the insurgency period, and the pivotal battle during that time was the first Battle of Fallujah, followed by the second battle in November.
And you were in Fallujah for that first
I
battle.
was in the first battle, yes.
Yeah. Third tour, February through August 2005.
I'll say that's more sustainability operations in the area, keeping like peacekeeping efforts, and overseeing the first national elections during that time period for Iraq. I think it was like the first national election in a few decades. So that was the main objective during that time. Still a lot of little ambushes, but nothing um, as large as Fallujah 1 and Fallujah 2.
And then the fourth tour, June through November 2008.
The best way I can summarize that one was just basically base operations, staying on base. It was kind of peaceful during that time. There wasn't a lot of ambushes, there wasn't a lot of firefights at all. We did local patrols, but everything was pretty much for me was confined to base operations and just maintaining the base at that time.
So at the end of your first tour, and we'll go back and walk through these, although obviously 4 tours, there's no way to go through them all in detail. So
Right.
just hit on just a few of a lot of the highlights that we could touch on. We'll just touch on a few. But at the end of that first tour, you felt like the war was over. And that was the feeling, right? This is
Right.
Gulf War II, boom, easy. There goes
Yep.
the statue of Saddam down, Iraqis rejoicing in the streets.
Yep.
I mean, there was the looting, you saw that, right? There was,
Right. Yeah. There was looting in the local neighborhoods at the banks that we tried to help keep down during that time.
but the story is, well, I mean, this is a hiccup, but feeling like mission accomplished, and the famous image of the president on the carrier with the sign behind him.
Right.
And then, as you say, tour two is Insurgency, Fallujah. Um, and then let's fast forward to 2008. I mean, you've done 3 combat tours in Iraq. Now you're in active reserve. You get called back into service. You go back to Iraq, 2008. Let's put you on the plane flying out after your fourth tour in Iraq. What was your feeling about the situation in Iraq by that point? I mean, by that point, you'd seen so much.
Just and like, is it ever going to end? Like, what's the mission here at this point? We're just, what are we staying here for? It doesn't seem like there's much combat going on. When are we going to relinquish control to the Iraqi government at this point? I'm just thinking, yeah, is it ever going to end?
Through these 4 tours, did you did you feel that, you know, just given what you saw, that Iraq could stand up on its own and be a well-functioning country?
From what I saw, there wasn't much confidence that that would happen. Um, it seemed like the military was always being ambushed, always being demoralized, and that it seemed like they're playing both sides, and it didn't seem like the government had enough to stand on its own up against the insurgency.
You mean the Iraqi government
Correct.
was playing both sides, meaning
It's
with
it's
the
what it felt like at
Americans,
times.
with the Americans and the coalition forces, and then also with the insurgency?
Correct.
And so again, these are just overview questions, some, relevant maybe more to one or two tours than others, but um, did you have many operations with or near Iraqi forces? These would be friendly, or maybe put that in
There
quote
were
marks, I mean
some
Iraqi forces serving with Americans.
right. There was some Iraqi forces embedded with our units that would, but they were kind of relegated to their own observation posts and their own patrols. They weren't necessarily patrolling with us alongside us, but they were maintaining their own operations. But we'd be there to support them if they needed anything.
Did you ever feel that you could really trust them as allies? If the Marines you're with really got into a tight situation, could you trust those Iraqi allies to step in and help you out?
I mean, I've never been confronted with a situation to where we had to rely on them. But I don't think I would want to find myself in that situation with them. For example, just when we do meetings with like their colonels or something like that, and we'd walk into the barracks, you could feel a lot of hate from those guys just being there. Just looking at us like they just did not want us there. Not to say all of them were like that, but there was enough like that you felt were probably playing both sides.
So in addition to feeling, just a general feeling, it's going to differ with individuals, but the general feeling that these Iraqi soldiers are, at least in their attitude against us, they don't want us here. You had the feeling that some of them might also actually be collaborating with the insurgents.
Correct, because I mean there was on the third deployment, our sniper team was tasked with doing an overwatch position for I think it was a higher ranking Marine commander that was coming to the area. And the CAT team, the combined anti-armor team, that was like four Humvees, four Marines per Humvee, they were going to clear the route. And when we were ambushed, they hit at every location where we were at. And I'm thinking there's no way they could have known that we were set up in those positions without some inside intel. That's the best way I can describe it. It was just too spot on to where we were, spot on to where the route that was being taken, and yeah, just no one. There's no way anyone could have known that.
So then when you realize that, that the adversary, the people we identify as adversaries, they have information, and it seems like they got this from someone on the inside who knows this, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So then what is the war about? I mean, just in your mind's eye, just place yourself in a building somewhere with other Marines, and you guys have had a crappy day and you're looking at each other, and somebody says, so what is this about? Why are we here? What would you say if some Marine said that to you at that point?
I mean, it's basically it felt like a peacekeeping effort. But honestly, I would probably tell them like I don't know what we're doing here at this point. I remember one of the lieutenants saying, because they felt like we're a police force there. Like if any little violent thing happened, we'd have to respond to it. If there's little police force was attacked, we would have to respond to that by trying to find out who's responsible for it. But it kind of got to the point like, well, we can't squash every little act of violence in this country. I mean, every city in the U.S. has violence. So it just kind of felt like we're kind of there as a peacekeeping force, but it didn't feel like there's any real objective. What we were told at the time was we're just there to maintain order for the elections.
Through these tours, and I guess I'm especially thinking the first three tours, did you see an evolution in who the enemy was? So, here coming into this question, here's what I'm thinking. When you're part of the invasion in 2003, the enemy is the uniformed Iraqi army. You go back the second time, now the enemy's not wearing a uniform. And then you hear stories about, well, who are the insurgents? Well, some of them are former military, some of them are I'm sorry, foreigners. Some
Right,
of them are like criminal gangsters, right?
right.
Did you experience this this feeling like, the enemies we're fighting is kind of proliferating. We don't even know really who we're shooting at right now. Uh,
Right.
and the number of adversaries grows. Like there are different people that we're fighting. Does that resonate with your experience?
Yeah, no, that's spot on. It was initially the conventional force of like the Republican Guard, uh, conventional army, and then once Fallujah happened, it felt like it was, probably local insurgents from Iraq, and then from my understanding, which I found out later, is that Chechens from Russia were coming in, Syrians were coming in, and I think those are the two main foreign forces that were coming in to fight us in Fallujah, and I think especially more so during the second battle. But right, it just shifted from conventional to an insurgency, and then foreigners were starting to pour in.
Let's go back. 9/11. I mean, all this gets triggered by 9/11. Um, what impact, if any, did 9/11 have on your own thinking about whether you would go into the military, what branch you would go into, et cetera?
Just prior to 9/11, I had plans to join the Marines anyways.
Okay.
But I think it kind of gave me more of a sense of, well, I'm going to do it for sure now. And with probably more of a sense of, I guess, patriotism, kind of similar to, I guess, what I assume felt like after Pearl Harbor, we were attacked and then people like, we want to get back at whoever did this. So just if anything, just solidified my choice to do it.
Yeah. And then you're right on the leading edge, right? Going into Iraq with that invasion. Um, what are your first memories? Yeah, I believe you're in Kuwait, is that right? You're
Right.
in Kuwait and then you cross the border going into Iraq. What are your first memories of kind of the first couple hours in Iraq?
Just being very nervous, like, hey, am I gonna come back? What are the battles gonna be like? Is it gonna be house to house? Tanks firing at tanks. But when it first initially started, once you cross the border, I think within the first few hours, it's just the radio kind of lit up with like, hey, we have a squad of Iraqis running around, with machine guns, and then you hear the tanks nearby in the Amtrak that we're in would start firing their machine guns, and then the next minute they're like, okay, squad, enemy squad down. So a lot of it was more hearing the battles going on because we were stuck in the back of these armored tracks for the most part during the invasion. And the only times we would get out is to clear like a nearby neighborhood where we'd get ambushed or to kind of rest and stretch out. But I remember one of the first things when I got out of the tracks was before we tacked into, I believe, the Basra oil refinery, was there was probably four or five multiple launch rocket systems that the Marine Corps had, and they're just firing into the air, and there's probably, just numerous amounts of rockets just flying into the sky, and you're kind of like, where is that going?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, just things like that, and then like I said, most of it was just audio, hearing it, and just clearing out nearby towns as we'd get ambushed and stuff like that.
Now your job on this first tour is radio operator, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, you're hearing a lot of the stuff that's going on. In those first hours, did it seem like, man, I mean, the Iraqi military is just collapsing? Is that kind of what it felt like?
Yeah, it kind of felt like it was, lack of a better term, like kind of steamrolling through the areas. Um, yeah, never did it sound like we were getting beaten back or getting held up at any point.
Did you, I mean, have experiences of Iraqi troops just, surrendering as quickly as they could?
I do, I do recall seeing once we would get out and hold security for the tanks, there would be lines of Iraqi soldiers getting taken as prisoners of war. But I think most of the time I would see their uniforms ditched and they'd melt into the population. So a lot of times you'd see Republican Guard uniforms and weapons just dropped where they're at. And
Wow.
yeah,
of course, not knowing that some of those guys are going to become insurgents, right?
Right.
Future. How about Iraqi civilians? What do you remember of them?
Initially, when the invasion started, they seemed kind of indifferent, like they're trying to get out of the way. Um, that's the best I can describe. It didn't seem like they were against us or for us necessarily. Just kind of wanted to, in passing, just be left alone. I don't recall any hostile civilians when we get into the towns. They just simply moved out of the way.
And how long did it take for you to get from, you cross the border from Kuwait, and then how long after that is it before you're in Baghdad?
Believe it was about 22 days that it took.
Oh, wow. Okay. So 22 days. So, I mean, generally then, just to summarize, what's going on those 3 weeks in between crossing in and getting into Baghdad?
Just essentially hitting different objectives that were given to the battalion. Initially hitting, we had to secure the oil refineries in Basra, Basra Airport, taking that over, and hitting like key junctions, key road junctions on the way up to Baghdad. And we really didn't hit any stiff resistance until we got to the outskirts of Baghdad at the Diyala River. So it's essentially kind of just like checking off the list of different objectives, different towns that we had to secure, and destroying any, I guess, Iraqi units along the way.
So when you say stiff resistance at Diyala outside Baghdad, I mean stiff relative to what you'd experienced up to then, which wasn't much, or was it serious
It
resistance?
wasn't much. Every time we'd hit a town, there'd be a couple RPGs, some machine gun fire. As soon as the tanks and the Cobra helicopters would come in and start firing, that's when the resistance just stopped. So it'd be real quick, ambush, probably drop their guns, drop the uniforms, get out of there, and then we just move on because the main objective was we can't sit here, we get bogged down, we got to get to Baghdad. And then once we got to Diyala, that's when we actually stayed there for more than a day, and mortars and machine guns were just being fired from both sides. When we are getting ready to cross the bridge into Baghdad, they were calling artillery strikes across the river on the other side of town to make sure there's no fighters still defending there. And you can see the rounds just walking in towards the bridge. And myself, along with first platoon, we were staged just near the bridge, and there was a wall that separated us from an armored vehicle that was behind us, which was basically the battalion command post, I think. And to this day, I still don't know exactly what happened. They say it was an enemy artillery round, but it might have been an American artillery round, which hit right on top of that thing and blew up over us, over first platoon. So I just always thought that was kind of weird, like, hey, like life and death was separated by a small wall, or the fact that this armored vehicle is right there. So just something that was kind of stuck with me.
And so you don't know whether that round was Iraqi or whether it was friendly fire.
The official report was enemy artillery, but a lot of the guys in the unit were just like, yeah, no, that was walked in by accident, they think. So um I don't the official report is enemy artillery round, but a lot of the guys in the unit thought it might have been friendly. Which I mean, we get it, it's war theme, it's never perfect. But yeah, we thought it might have been friendly.
And there were casualties, right?
Right. I think two trackers who I just talked to get batteries from had died. And then I think maybe another 10 to 12 wounded that were in that area. Yeah, a lot of guys got evacuated at that point.
And this was your first experience of combat, really, or of battle death, of death
Right, American battle deaths, yeah.
of American battle deaths. At this point, what was your perception of the Iraqi military? I mean, based on what I'm hearing up thus far, I'm thinking you guys probably didn't take them real seriously as an adversary at this point.
Not really. I guess the overwhelming feeling amongst the Marines was kind of like, hey, I think the battalion commander even said the gang that can't shoot straight. Um, yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of I don't want to say respect, but we just they just we expected the Republican Guard to put up a huge resistance, and it just never happened. So I guess we kind of didn't respect them after that. After they kind of, we'd always see their uniforms on the ground. They're kind of retreating back. So
Yeah. As you move into Baghdad, did you have this experience of the Iraqi crowds coming out and cheering and all that?
I did, which totally caught me off guard because before we invaded, they're like, hey, Baghdad's going to be Stalingrad part two. I'm thinking, people be hanging out of windows, shooting at us with machine guns, RPGs, tanks in the streets waiting for us. And then when we get there, they're passing out flowers and, USA #1. And I couldn't believe it.
In retrospect, what do you think that was all about? I mean, were they sincere, or was that, well, here's the new
It
punch,
honestly felt
we better get
sincere. I
along?
mean, I don't know if they just did not like Saddam's regime that much that they felt relief knowing that we were getting ready to replace it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't feel, forced or non-genuine. Because everywhere we went in that Iraq neighborhood, everyone was happy to see us for the most part.
Yeah. What did you see of the looting?
From what I remember, it looked like just a lot of local looting from maybe nearby houses, like furniture, stuff like that, TVs. The specific incident where there was actual, uh, I guess, looting from businesses was a nearby bank, and people were just trying to force their way in, and we get there, and we're trying to keep them out. And a couple Marines actually went down to the vault to clear out the Iraqis that were down there, and a few had passed out from smoke inhalation. I guess there was a small fire down there, and they thought the gas masks would keep, I guess, the carbon dioxide out, of from breathing it in. And yeah, we had a few guys pass out, but they came to after.
A few Iraqi guys or Marines?
A few Marines that had put on the gas mask thinking it would keep out
Oh, I
the
see.
CO2.
Wow. So they're trying to prevent this bank from being looted.
Right.
Yeah. What was your own interpretation of the looting at the time?
I think they're just taking advantage of the situation. There was really no, I guess, government control in place, and they're just trying to get what they could during a tense time.
Yeah. And is that where you stay until the end of this first tour? Are you basically in Baghdad then for the rest for?
For the most part, right? Stay in Baghdad for a little bit, and then we kind of shifted to a nearby military compound that I think used to belong to the Republican Guard, but it was kind of like a staging area for us to go back to Kuwait.
And is it primarily just setting up, security
Right.
outposts and checkpoints and all this kind of stuff? Just maintaining security, is that primarily it?
Right. It's just maintaining perimeter security until the army basically kind of took over that role, and then we were able to ship off. But I don't recall being in Baghdad too long.
Do you remember, so you leave in June of 2003. As you look back on that, do you remember any little hints of what's to come?
Yes. When I was in Japan after coming back from Iraq, I'd see the Marine Corps Times, a newspaper on base, and it would say, casualties rising, casualties hit 500 U.S. service members dead. I'm like, okay, this is not going as planned because obviously there are continuous ambushes and they're resisting. So I just kind of had a feeling that it wasn't going well.
Now, is it between tour one and tour two that you switch jobs from radio operator to sniper?
Right.
What was it that attracted you to the sniper role?
Honestly, because we had a sniper team attached to us during the invasion, and just how professional those guys were.
Hmm.
Like it's probably the main thing. I just wanted to try something new, and the feeling of we're probably going to go back. I wanted to be with a group of guys that I guess took the job a little bit more seriously. Not to say these other guys didn't, but the guys who wanted to better themselves. And then if you get in a firefight, you're gonna have a group of professionals with you. And so for me, I was a what's called a pig. There's two types of snipers. There's a pig and a hog. So for me, I was a pig, a professionally instructed gunman, and the hogs are the school trained guys, called hunter of gunmen. So I initially tried out for the platoon, passed the indoctrination. Uh, I don't want to say haze, but they train you hard and basically teach you everything you need to know before going off to the school in Pendleton.
Right, and very physically demanding, and not many made it through the school, right?
Right, and even the indoc. When I took the initial indoc, I think by the end of the first 2 months, 3 months, maybe max, I was the only guy left.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was just constant, like, okay, let's go for a mile run. Okay, then we're gonna go sit in class for an hour, and then in the middle of the class, they'll lay out like 10 items. Like, okay, look at these 10 items, yelling at you, whatever, trying to distract you. And then they'll have you run off again. And then in the middle of the run, they'll be like, okay, now recall these 10 items, size, shape, color, everything, just to kind of work on our observation skills. our ability to recall certain things.
And you do, I mean, you are a sniper when you go back. Was all that training as as you actually then were a sniper in the battle for Fallujah, all that training came in handy, I'm assuming.
Oh, definitely, yes,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
What is the best thing and the hardest thing about being a sniper?
I guess the best thing, like I kind of mentioned earlier, was just being with a group of professionals that took the job serious. If we get ambushed or something happens, you can rely on these guys to perform. I think the worst thing is probably taking someone's life within, I guess that uh, such a close range. I guess you can say because given the scope, you're observing the person as a whole when you take their life, and that's probably just the toughest thing.
This is something, even as you say it, you can bring images to your mind.
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah.
So this might come across as a really stupid question. But I've talked to a lot of combat vets, guys in Vietnam who say, most of the time the only time you saw the enemy was after a firefight, and you'd see the dead enemy once you went and looked and, got the body count. You're not shooting at people, you're shooting at gun flashes. And
Right.
here I am with my M16 or my 50 or my M60 or whatever, and I don't know whether I hit anybody or not. And so they go through life not knowing, you know. Now in your case, there's no ambiguity at all, right?
No, every time I've had to pull the trigger, it was just I knew exactly. I always saw them every time.
So the question, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how to formulate the question, but because I can't think of it like a serious way to formulate the question. The question is just, I think, is just going to sound stupid. But if given the choice, would you prefer to keep the definite knowledge that you have, or would you prefer to be in the position of those other vets who say, well, I pulled the trigger and shot at those tracers coming at me, but I don't really know what happened.
I would keep my experience, I think, because it was a conscious decision each time with the idea of like, hey, am I saving Marine lives? Am I saving civilian lives? Does this help with the objective? To where these guys are kind of, and it's no derogatory thing to them. They're kind of spraying and praying. They don't know what if they're hitting enemy and maybe sometimes maybe even civilians. I don't know, depending on the situation, the environment. But I think I'd rather keep my experience and just know I did what I did.
Do you think it's correct? And I want to ask you about how how things actually operated. Um, but before I do that, do you think it's correct to think of your role as a sniper and the other Marine snipers as kind of guardian angels? You've got these Marines down here in the streets going door to door, they're patrolling. You're up here and you're kind of looking out for them, right? You're looking a
Right.
block ahead, right?
Right, yeah, we're always taught, it's called Overwatch. Basically, if there's like a patrol and we're in the area and we're attached to like a company or a platoon, we would provide Overwatch as they move through a certain area. And even in Fallujah, when they were taking sniper fire, when we first got to the first day of the battle, as soon as they started taking sniper fire, like, hey, where's the sniper team attached to us, and I had to go to their CP where they're taking fire, and it was expected, like, hey, do something about this. You know what I mean? So everyone's kind of looking at me like, hey, you can take the sniper out as they're taking fire. So
Yeah, so I mean, really, I mean, you're looking for the enemy, but the objective here is really you're looking out for those other
right,
Marines who can't see what you can see.
correct, yeah, because we have the observation, we have the optics, spotting scopes, binoculars, the rifle scope, things like that. And I remember one of the snipers, he was an honor graduate from sniper school when I got to the platoon in 2003. And I remember him specifically saying, he's like, hey, it's not our job to take lives, it's our job to save lives. I'm like, so that just kind of stuck with me. So I just kind of kept that in the back of my head.
Sure. So, so walk me through it. You guys are planning, so we've got a plan. We're going to go into this part of Fallujah. So how does it work? I mean, do you guys go in first, get positioned, and then those guys come in? What's just how does that operation unfold?
So for Fallujah, I mean, the plan was just basically support the rifle company that you're attached to, as needed. We'd have a security element with us, two Marine infantry guys that would essentially watch our backs, as our job was to look for overwatch positions over the line company. And that was pretty much it. It was pretty simple, straightforward. Like, hey, if we're taking fire, I'm gonna specifically talk to the lieutenant. He's like, hey, just take out as many as you can. Just help us out in that regard. And yeah, basically maintain the high position and take out any threats.
So is it something like, okay, the officer says, all right, these Marines, they're gonna head down this street and, something like in 5 minutes, we're gonna start heading down this street. In those 5 minutes, you guys get up in that building. So you've got overwatch of us as we're moving down that street. They would get down, then you'd come down and then jump up again someplace further down. Is that kind of how it went? Kind of a hop?
Sometimes, right, that'd be like a bounty in Overwatch. But specifically in Fallujah, it was just, I mean, it was pretty chaotic. It's like everyone just got online, rushed into the city, like full front assault, and basically like, hey, find a good position that you can support us as everything's going on. But it was more in the third deployment to where, yeah, we'd be like, hey, or we're going to support you guys during this patrol. This is the outline of the patrol. This is the area of the neighborhood we're going to watch. If you guys can sit in this high position and provide Overwatch, that'd be beneficial to them. But a lot of the times too, it was more, we're getting hit with IEDs on this road. We need you to watch this road for anyone placing IEDs, and you're going to be here for 2 days. And a lot of times it's just sitting there watching some random road in the middle of nowhere that had been recently placed with IEDs, and just watching it with just me and one other person. That
Yeah.
was probably most of the missions we did.
I mean, so one of the interesting things is your training is very physical. It's very mental too, the way you describe it. It's very mental, um, emphasizing memory and details,
Right.
but very, very physical. Um, but then, as you describe it, the sniper work, yeah, a lot of it is you're just you're there in one spot for
Yeah,
hours or
very boring.
yeah, I mean just very what's the right word? I mean you're just there on scene. Um so I mean what kind of I guess I'm wondering about sort of the personal traits that it takes to be an effective sniper. So just as an example, I mean, some kid says he wants to be a Navy SEAL, but then you find out he's afraid of heights, so well, that's probably not going to work out, because if you're just on the roof of a house and you're scared to death, you're probably not going to succeed as a SEAL. So, so one trait that it's going to take to be a successful SEAL is not being afraid of heights in that way. What are some of the traits that, make for an effective sniper?
I would think probably more so for me, it was, I think, perseverance, not quitting. Um,
Because you're there for a
yes,
long time just waiting to see something.
right.
Yeah.
So patience is a big one. And that's probably the main one, probably patience and your ability to recall information. Because I remember that's the one thing they kept testing us on. Like, hey, can you remember this definition for whatever thing it was verbatim? Can you recall which items you just observed? Can you sit in this spot for 2 days without, shifting and moving and drawing attention to yourself? So I'll probably say perseverance and patience.
Would it also require the ability to put things away? So here's what I mean. Um, you've got a target's out, but we can't spend a lot of time dwelling on that. We just got to put that away because there might be another target, in an hour. Is that something too, just the ability just to put it away and to move forward?
Yeah, I would think so because when we got ambushed on the third tour, which was insane because we thought we're all gonna die, just based on how outnumbered we were. It was kind of like, okay, well, you guys get the weekend off, and then after the weekend, you guys are going back out and do observation posts. So yeah, the ability to kind of just stuff it away and just kind of not dwell on it is a good trait to have. Just move past it, like, hey, we survived it, we got through it. Just move on. Just ability to move on.
So this is the third tour when you got ambushed.
Yes.
Is this the Father's Day massacre?
Correct, yep.
How just what's the basic story there?
So kind of going back on that, our job was to provide overwatch for the CAT team, the Humvee teams that were going to provide route clearance for, I believe, a Marine commander that was coming through the area. And as the CAT team was essentially starting their route to clear the road down the street from our position, they were ambushed by maybe like 30, 40 insurgents compared to their maybe 12 Marines. So we're kind of in our position. I'm falling asleep. It's like 5 in the morning. And then I just hear down the street, and it sounds like thunder. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And then immediately everyone in the group kind of knew like they're getting ambushed. So we're throwing our stuff on as fast as we can because the urgency was there. It's kind of hard. It wasn't a panic, but you could sense it. Like we need to get our shit on right now. And the building we're in that we use as a post is getting built from the ground up. So there's no roof. So there's a staircase leading to the open, I guess, roof area. I look over the ledge and then a sniper shoots at me. I'm like, okay, well, they know we're here. So they knew that where the CAT team was going to be. They know our position. But I think there was a disconnect between that sniper and the insurgents on the ground that were walking by us because they didn't know we're in the house. The whole time we're like, hey, we got two guys in front of the house carrying, RPGs, machine guns. And I think down the street there was like some white sedan, there's RPGs and machine guns hanging out with a group of like 5 guys. So we're thinking, okay, they're setting up on us. They're getting ready to ambush us. So just get ready. And sure enough, they try to come in. I'm shooting the guys as they come in. We're throwing grenades at them because we know they're stacked on the other side of the wall. And after we kind of repelled their initial attempts to get in, it felt like the whole neighborhood just started shooting at us. At least 4 machine guns, I think, were shooting out of position. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm dead. I'm waiting for an RPG to come ripping through the wall. But luckily, the house was made out of solid bricks, so none of the rounds got through.
Wow.
And we're putting out on the radio, like, hey, we need to get out of here. Like, we need QRF, Quick Reaction Force, which would be like a squad of Marines from whatever company we're attached to will come and help us. So they get dispatched, they get ambushed. And so we're just thinking help's not going to arrive. And then I couldn't tell you how long the battle lasted because my adrenaline was so high. The same CAT team that was ambushed fought their way through that ambush. Probably killed maybe 20, 30 insurgents. Okay, we're done there. Drove through, I think, a car bomb that was on the side of the road, got to us, and then started shooting at the guys that were basically sent up on our position to get back into the house. I think after the fact, we found a heavy machine gun that I think they were getting ready to set up on to our position. And as soon as that CAT team got there, an RPG had bounced off one of their turrets, one of the machine gunners' turrets. So I don't know if that RPG was meant for our building or what they were doing, but had they not showed up, I don't know if I'd be here right now, to be honest. So it was a very crazy day.
Wow. When you felt like, all right, time's up, right? We're not going to make it through this thing. Is So what's the next thought then? All right, well then just take as many of them out with me as possible, or
Right. Initially, when it first started, I was frightened. I'm not gonna lie. I was scared. This is a fight or flight kind of kicked in. I'm like, shit, do we just run out of this position because they're surrounding us soon? Should we get out now? But I'm like, where are we gonna run to? Where are we gonna go? They already have it surrounded. They're gonna shoot us as we get out. So it's kind of like, okay, well, we're probably gonna die. Let's do our best and take as many as we can. Yeah. And that's the overwhelming feeling that kind of took over, being angry because I had a month left before I went home.
wow,
And just the fact that, like, hey, yeah, we're probably gonna die, but we're gonna take as many as we can.
wow.
Very strange feeling.
So all right, so so this wraps up, and and then what do you do? I mean, do you guys just hunker down where you are, or do you get out of there?
Right, we hunkered down for a little bit. The CAT team showed up. They gave us ammo as we needed it. They went back out to go finish, I guess, mopping up the ambush. Um, Held in place until air cover arrived. I remember one of the Marine helicopters showed up with I guess it was a gunship. They showed up, held in place until everyone can kind of figure their surroundings of what just happened. And then the CAT team came back, and then that's when we, gathered the deceased fighters, put on the Humvee, and just went back to the base and just checked all the bodies for intel.
The Iraqi bodies.
Right, the Iraqi insurgents.
Yeah, the Iraqi insurgents. So I asked a guy from Afghanistan, and it's very different. I mean, they're out on a, they're out in the country, and they get ambushed, and they get through that firefight. And I said, all right, so once the firefight's over, then, so what do you guys do? And he said, everyone lights up a cigarette, and I don't know if that happened with you guys, but everyone lights up a smoke, and and then you just kind of start debriefing. What did you see? Did you see that? And is that basically the same
That's
thing?
exactly what, yeah, it's exactly. We went back to the forward operating base with one of the attached companies, and we're just like, what the hell was that? Like, we're just like, can't believe it survived. My buddy, he's smoking a cigarette. We're talking about, what did you see? What did you hear? And that's what I kind of found a lot of the details after the fact, like the guys in the car that were, had RPGs, because the guys downstairs saw this, and the guys, walking in front of the house with the RPGs, and what happened with the cat team. Just, yeah, I was just debriefing, and then there was an intel unit from the Marine Corps that showed up, and then and we had to give them basically interviews of what happened, so I guess to provide them more intel with what was going on in the area.
Now, you said a few minutes ago that you came under fire from from an insurgent sniper. In your work as a sniper, did you ever find yourself in kind of, a counter hunt with an enemy sniper?
I did in the first Battle of Fallujah, the first day, when Kilo Company was taking fire. Um, they're like, hey, we're at the CP, we're taking fire, and we need you guys to come here and help us find this guy. I'm like, okay, I'll do my best. It's an urban environment. There's a lot of places this guy could be hiding. So I remember getting to the CP and getting to the rooftop, and the sniper was still shooting at us through like the windows, through the door. I'm kind of like, shit, this is for real. Like this is like the first invasion where these guys were kind of like a pushover. You kind of had the sense that there's a stiffer fight, in hand. So me and my partner, we get up on the rooftop trying to find this guy. It's basically a ledge that leads up higher from the roof that they were already on. And I remember a machine gunner below me was like, hey, the snipers, I think he's shooting at you. And I didn't really have much respect for the enemy combatants really still at that time. I was like, he's, like anyways, because his round was so off. I was like, let me try to find this guy. And then sure enough, within maybe 15 seconds after that, a round hit right in front of my face, on the ledge. And if it wasn't for that ledge, it would have been right in my head. And as soon as I put my head down after, I could hear the rounds cracking by my ear. And it felt like they're very close because I was scared. So I was like, hey, told my partner, I was like, we have to get off this roof, which kind of went against our training. We're trained to go in a room and kind of sit back. But I guess due to the nature of the battle at the time, it's just kind of like, hurry up, get here. So after getting off that roof, we just started shooting out windows to where people were like, hey, he's, shooting out of this window. So we're just shooting out the windows, and then we tell the forward air controller, like, hey, we think he's in this building. And we're telling the armored tracks down there too, like, hey, shoot your grenades into this window. I remember the forward air controller being pretty stressed out. He was pissed off that we're taking fire like that. Um, but the guy he was with ended up shooting a smoke round into the building, and at which point signaled for a Cobra helicopter to come in from behind it and launch rockets into the building. So
And
that was probably the only time to where I was kind of like in that counter sniper phase,
yeah.
and it was pretty crazy.
And did the enemy sniper stop after the Cobra?
Yeah, he stopped.
Yeah.
He stopped probably after we started shooting out the windows, but we just wanted to make sure. I don't know if he broke around, but I mean, the fire stopped.
Normally, when I talk to combat vets and a firefight has started, or they're a Cobra pilot in Vietnam or something, and they're heading into a target, I've learned by now that, if you ask the question, what was going through your mind, that question is not really going to get you anywhere, because what you're going to hear is you're not thinking anything. Your training kicks in, the adrenaline kicks in, and there's not like linear thinking going on. You're just responding to events, you're responding to training. But I wonder if it's a little bit different in your case. And in your memoir, you describe, there are several instances you describe where you've got somebody in your sights. You've got either someone who is an insurgent, or someone whom you suspect is an insurgent. So, and I'm not going to read this whole passage, but just a couple sentences or a few sentences. Here's what you write. As the Iraqi male reappeared, he squatted behind the nearby bush, facing our lines with his binoculars yet again. So that's obviously suspicious.
Mhm.
I then placed my crosshairs over his chest, just below his neck. I had my sights trained on him for approximately 5 seconds before I pulled the trigger. And what I'm interested in is, and this is not meant to pry, just to try to understand the world of war from the perspective of a sniper. Those 5 seconds, or there are other cases where you've got somebody in your crosshairs, but you're actually having to decide. I think in this case, it's pretty clear.
Right.
This is a clear case, but there are other cases where it's less clear, and you actually have to decide, and it is your call. Um, and it's quiet, or maybe it's not quiet. I don't know what's going on, but it's, at that moment, it's, it's your thoughts and your finger on the trigger, and you're making the decision. What kinds of questions are going through your mind as you're making this decision?
Just basically if that person's a threat, what does their intent seem to be? Like with some with the binoculars, I'm thinking, okay, they're scouting our position. The night before that, our left flank was ambushed by a squad of insurgents that night. So we're thinking, this whoever's on these binoculars, they're reporting our positions back. They're probably adjusting indirect fire like mortars. We've been taking sniper fire all day. They're probably reporting our positions to the snipers, that they have. As compared to someone who's simply peering over like a wall, who's like maybe trying to gain their surroundings, like, hey, what the hell's going on? There's a war going on, there's gunfire going on. Um, if they pose any real threat, if what they're doing is going to risk lives to other people, that's basically the main thing. I don't think anyone would have questioned me had I made that decision. But something I have to live with, and I have to make sure, hey, if kind of live with myself after that, basically. Are they a threat?
Sure. Now, in some cases, it's really clear, right? And then in other cases, it's a judgment call. And then, I mean, I'm sure there are other cases where you've got your sights on somebody, and you just conclude, I'm not going to pull the trigger on this one.
Right.
Um, so I wonder if, I mean, maybe if you could just sort of give us an example, what would be an example of a case that was just completely clear? This guy is obviously enemy. I've got him, going to do what we're going to do.
Also, the fact that they're armed. That's the most clear cut case, and they're wearing, the typical, I don't want to say black pajamas, but like all black head wraps, which was typically always worn by the fighters in Fallujah. That was the simplest way to identify them. So
Sure.
obviously, if they're armed with an AK and they're because everyone that we had interaction with in the city that were civilians that weren't combatants, they would basically do their best to vacate the area and leave. And then after that, it kind of turned into where you kind of knew who the fighters were that stayed.
And then I think that, I could, I think the answer to this is going to be pretty clear, but what about, in your own case, an example you can remember from your own experience where you do have someone in your sights, but you conclude pretty quickly, no, I'm not going to, this one, this one's a no.
So I think the second it was the second day of the Battle of Fallujah, where directly in front of our lines, there's this building, and a Iraqi male pops his head up over the roof, and he's just kind of looking around. I'm like, okay, this guy's wearing no shirt. Looks like a dad who works at a mechanic shop or something like that. And no weapon, no binoculars, no tools that can be used against us. And I guess he's saying in the battle. Um, to me, that's pretty clear cut. Are people that were just simply coming out from their houses trying to get out of the area. Those were simple, clear cut cases where I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So
How about, did you have a case where it's a 50-50, 60-40, and you're really just kind of, you're just going through this process of ranking a true decision?
probably when there's an insurgent scout that was running with his weapon across an open field. He wasn't surrendering. He wasn't doing anything that would indicate to us that he was trying to get out of the area. Like I said, the night before we just had been ambushed on our left flank, which is where he was headed. So I don't know if he was getting ready to reinforce that. I mean, it crossed my mind like, okay, should I do it? Should I do it? But it was a split second decision. If he gets past this line of sight and he's able to regroup with a bunch of guys, can it be deadly for the Marines to our left flank? So in that time, I was like, you know what? He's got a weapon. He's running. He's dressed in the traditional garb. I had, took his life.
Combat vets often there are, things that kind of a tape in their mind that they'll play over and over and over and over again. And there's a, you know, just wondering about, you know, I should have done this and I should have done that. Is that the case for you, or are there tapes, one or two tapes that you find yourself kind of rolling over and over again in your mind?
Probably with that scout when I shot him. He initially didn't pass, I should say. The thing was that a lot of these insurgent fighters were taking adrenaline to when they fought against us. So a lot of the times they would just keep going after they get hit. And I'm just thinking, okay, this guy just shot, he's wounded. Do I get to him? And I'm like, okay, well, if I get out there, I'm gonna get shot by a sniper. I'm gonna get ambushed by another group. So it was essentially of doing, do we put him out of his misery or what do we do? And the hard choice had to be made. I mean, there was no, regardless, upon receiving that type of wound, there was no way that that person would have made it. So it's more of like a mercy thing. That's probably the worst thing that I have to live through with my mind, and something I think about pretty often. But I mean, I felt like what I did was, right at the time.
On the other side, um, can you bring to your memory um, other Marines telling you after an operation that had you not been there, then things could have been a lot worse for them?
And this was a complete surprise to me. I ended up receiving an award with my actions against the enemy sniper. So I guess someone was talking about it. I just had no idea that that was even something that was brought up to higher command after the battle.
So you're done with your third tour, your enlistment's up, you are now inactive reserve. How how does word come to you that you're being called back now out of inactive reserve?
I believe it was a phone call from headquarters Marine Corps Reserve in, I think it was Missouri. Like, hey, we're having a muster. We need you to report to I needed to report to in California to go attend this muster. And I'm talking. I'm like, hey, am I getting recalled to go back to Iraq? And like, no, 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 we just want to do a muster and account for all the Marines that we have on in active reserve. And sure enough, went back to Iraq. So
When you finally realized that the answer to that question is yes, you are going back to Iraq, what was your own reaction?
it's just like again, like anxiety. Because every time I went, before every deployment was just anxiety, like, am I gonna survive this? Because each time it was like a close call. First deployment almost got blown up by artillery round. Second deployment got shot in the face by a sniper. Third deployment got killed in an ambush. Something, how much more, can I mentally take on this? And luckily, that last deployment was just kind of just sitting down, kind of relaxing, and just focusing on checkpoints.
So I think you might have just answered my question. So the question was, that fourth deployment when, mostly kind of doing security work and not out there in the thick of things. The question was, did you sometimes wish that you were out there, or did you have that feeling, I've done my time, I've made my contribution, I don't want to be out there?
No, I had enough. I was like, I don't care to go out on patrol or get involved with that after the third deployment. I was like, I had enough of it.
Yeah. If you had done only the first tour, I think that what you experienced in that first tour is going to change you. I mean, I think it's the extremely rare person who isn't changed in some real way by the experience of combat. But you have the invasion, you have Fallujah, you go back the second time on the tail end of Fallujah, but then, I mean, just these really intense experiences. And then you have the fourth tour, which is um, not like the previous three, but still you're in this tough environment. So as of then, let's say Christmas time 2008, so you go into Iraq with the invasion in 2003. We fast forward now more than 5 years later, Christmas time 2008. How has Brian Van Gordon changed in those 5 years as a result of all this time in Iraq?
I guess the best thing I could, how I can explain it is probably more grateful. After those experiences, more grateful for my family and just not taking things for granted. I have to admit, I don't like being in crowds too much. I don't like uh, big crowds, I guess you can say. Just kind of like a heightened sense of anxiety, I guess. That's kind of always been with me after that. But I don't think it's been inhibited my ability to move on with life after that. But yeah.
Is is your combat experience in Iraq, is it just kind of a continual presence with you?
It is, yeah. I think about it every day. I don't wake up having nightmares. I do dream about it. I dream about being ambushed or getting shot at by another sniper. Dreams like that. But never, I won't wake up like in a cold sweat and screaming. But I just think about it daily. And sometimes, like when the ambush happened on the third tour, that first year, I was just wake up and like, man, that really happened. Just things like that. Just kind of disbelief that that happened.
Do you feel like being a combat vet kind of do you think it creates like a little bit of a distance between you and most of society? And here's what I'm thinking now. You got the World War II generation. And of course, a lot of those soldiers, sailors, Marines, they didn't see combat. They're in support roles.
Right.
A lot of them did see combat, and
Mhm.
so I think in every town, you've got you've got guys who saw combat, right? And
Right.
they know each other and they can talk about it if they want to. So many fewer served in Iraq, so few serve in the military for starters. And then, of all the forces that go to Iraq, you've got a lot of support troops. And so
Right.
the number of combatants, it's a pretty small number. And do you feel like, just kind of just the way the world is, the experience of combat by this tiny minority of people, the just regular American life. Do you feel that that experience of combat does kind of create a little bit of a chasm between yourself and society generally?
Yeah, it always kind of felt like after I got out and then went on to my profession, it was still kind of hard to connect with people, talk to people about what happened. And I remember talking to another guy at work, just me and him in the car, and I talked about certain things. And I kind of teared up, and I was kind of embarrassed, and it didn't seem like he understood what was going on. So I was like, I'll never do that again. So I just always kind of felt like if you weren't there and go through that experience, it's kind of hard for them to understand. And I don't hold anything against them. It's not their fault they didn't go through it, but it is hard. It feels like it's hard to connect with people and talk about those things.
You tell a story, related to your service where you guys actually dress up in Iraqi clothing. So what is the story of that?
So the idea behind that was when we were in Haditha at the operating base there, we would constantly do foot patrols out of the base, trying to set up overwatch on different roads. Never see anything. We always felt like we were being watched when we'd get in our positions. So we're like, okay, what can we do to be undetected? Okay, well, let's dress up like Iraqis and get an Iraqi vehicle and set that up um, to be able to shoot out of if we had to. And I think we maybe did that twice. The first was a reconnaissance mission to kind of check the road, see what the reaction would be from the population. Nothing. We didn't feel like we were detected in any way. The second time we went out to go just kind of do more reconnaissance, we were getting chased by a group of Iraqi males in a truck. We're like, what the hell? So we thought they were insurgents. We just figured we were Americans dressed as Iraqis. And we were armed with AKs. And the sergeant that was in the car with us was like, hey, shoot at them, get them off our ass. And sure enough, the guy I was with in that mission shot at them. Nothing too crazy. Just maybe one shot. They backed off. We called for QRF, acted like we got detained. But then we later found out that they were the actual Iraqi civilians that thought we were the insurgents, the Mujahideen,
Oh,
and were trying to stop us from operating in the area. So I thought that was a shock to me because it kind of showed
wow.
like maybe not all of them are against us.
So
So,
they thought you guys were insurgents.
right.
Wow, that's
So we
crazy.
never did that again after.
And you guys are armed with AKs.
Right.
So dressed in Iraqi gear, direct Iraqi clothing, and armed with AKs. Now, is this something that you guys just kind of did on your own with a junior officer saying go for it? Or, I mean, did
Right.
and actually sign off on this?
It was the sergeant that was directly in charge of our team was like, hey, maybe let's try this. He passed it off to the platoon commander for the scout sniper platoon, who then passes it to the battalion commander who gives the blessing on it. And it was a kind of a point where we're kind of getting desperate to try something new and try to find these guys placing the IEDs. And the funny thing is we had more success in just regular, US military clothing, finding someone placing an ID as opposed to dressing up like Iraqis.
Do you think that's because dressed up like Iraqis, you guys were just kind of really self-conscious and wondering whether the ruse was working?
I think possibly, but I think not too many Iraqis drive around with the head wraps. All four, four
Oh,
people in the car were just covered in head wraps. So I think they saw that and was like, that's kind of suspicious. That's not what we typically do. And it's all males in this little red car driving alone. So I think that brought more attention than anything.
two related questions, and these are questions that I've pitched to combat vets over the years. The first question is, it has to do with, the the difficult memories that you have related to being in combat. So it's just a thought exercise.
Okay.
And so the thought exercise is that someone has a potion and all you need to do is take a sip of it, and all of your good memories from your service in Iraq, whatever those good memories are, you get to keep all those. But the bad memories, all you need to do is sip this potion one time and all of those bad memories go away. And the question is, would you sip the potion?
I'd say no. Um, I guess those experiences help me kind of see life in a different way, to not take things for granted. I think I mentioned in the memoir how seeing, civilians living out of these blown out buildings and there's just no hope for them. They have no electricity, they have little food. And I remember just thinking, I was kind of getting depressed seeing it every single day. I was like, Jesus Christ, this is horrible. And thinking to myself, when I get back home, I'm just going to go to school. I'm going to get my college degree. I'm going to make something of myself because these people just don't have it here. So the negative things, I think they're also, I guess, learning experiences for me. That's the best way I can describe it.
So now let's flip it around, sort of a different thought exercise. And tomorrow, for some reason, you're going to lose all of your memories in Iraq. They're going to be taken away from you, except for one or two. So you get to choose which one or two memories you hold on to. All the rest are going to go. Um, what's the one or the two memories that you would hold on to?
There's two I could choose was probably surviving that ambush on the third deployment on Father's Day. Just the feeling of relief and just, oh my God, we made it out of it. It's something I'll never forget. And then seeing my family again coming back from each tour, if I could collectively make that one memory. But probably those two things, coming back home, seeing my family and living through that crazy ambush on the third tour. Because one made me grateful for life and the other reinforced it.